other indications of what will be happening. And so as he talks of the rapture, he said, as the days of Noah, so shall it be at the time when he comes for his church. For in the days of Noah, they were eating and drinking until Noah went into the ark, and they didn't know until the flood took them away. And then he said, two will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken, the other left. Two will be in the field. One will be taken, the other left. Two will be sleeping in the bed. One will be taken, the other left. And then he said, watch, therefore, for you know not what hour the Lord does come. And then he gives a couple of illustrations. He said, if the good man of the house had known what hour the thieves were coming, he would have been watching. And then he talked about his servants. The good servant who took care of the issues was faithful, and the evil servant who said, my Lord delays his coming, and he began to misuse the privileges that were given to him. And then he talks about the 10 virgins. 5 were wise, 5 were foolish. They were waiting for the bridegroom to come. They were slumbering and sleeping, and the call went out, behold, the bridegroom cometh, and they awoke and they began to trim their lamps. And the wise virgins, they found that they had sufficient oil, but the foolish found that they had no oil. They said to them, give us some of your oil. Our lamps are going out. And they said, we can't spare it. Go and seek to buy some. And while they were gone, the Lord came and he said, they that were ready went in. The rapture of the church, important that you be ready. Talking about the rapture, in Matthew 25, Jesus said, watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour wherein the Son of Man is coming. And he begins to speak of his second coming then in Matthew 25:14. And he told how that the servants would be rewarded for how they had used the things that the Lord had entrusted to them. In the 31st verse, he said, when the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all of the holy angels with him. This is his second coming. Then he will sit upon his throne of glory, and before him will be gathered all of the nations. He'll separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from his goats. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, Daniel chapter 12:11, and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, it'll be 1,290 days, as we mentioned earlier. And then he said, blessed is he who waits and comes to 1,335 days. And this is the period that Jesus will be spending in judgment. When Christ returns, he'll gather together the nations for judgment, because many of those who did survive the Great Tribulation will not be allowed to go in to the kingdom age, but will be cut off at that time. And it would appear from Daniel that the time of judging, when Christ returns, the nations, to determine those that will be allowed to go into the millennial period, will be a period of 45 days. And so it's a tough way to go, but an unlikely way to go if you are not ready when the Lord comes for his church and when God's judgment is poured out. The odds of surviving the Great Tribulation are very poor. And there will be a few that will, but not many. But he will be judging and allowing some to go on in to the period of his reign over the earth. So basically, that's the scenario that the Bible sets out for the future. The rapture of the church, the Great Tribulation, and then the second coming of the church, and then Jesus setting up his kingdom, the kingdom of God, that which we've been praying for when we've been praying, thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. At that time, we will see the world as God intended it to be, under the rulership and reign of God. You know, today we have people that say, well, if God is a God of love, why is it that children are born with handicaps? If God is a God of love, then why? And they look at all of the wars and all of the bloodshed and all of the murders and all of the things that are happening on our earth, and they try to use this as a argument against God and against God being a God of love. But we need to realize that Satan is the god of this world. He is in control. God has allowed it to be. But God's kingdom is going to come. The day will come when his will be done here on earth, even as it is in heaven. And that's what we are specifically praying for when we repeat the Lord's Prayer. Excuse me. So now that's an introduction for chapter 10. For I believe here in chapter 10 we have the account of the glorious coming of Jesus Christ to establish God's kingdom upon the earth. I saw another mighty angel, John said, who came down from heaven. He was clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was upon his head, and his face was as it were the sun, and his feet as pillars of fire. And by the description, I believe that this is a reference to Jesus Christ and his second coming. Now, I will admit that many wonderful Bible scholars do not see it this way. Great Bible scholars are pretty much divided on this particular issue, if this great angel is indeed Jesus and his second coming. And I have read the arguments on both sides, and I have come to the conclusion that it is Jesus. But if you come to the other conclusion, you have a lot of scholars that are with you, and it's not something that we know for certain. But let me just share with you why I believe that this is the second coming of Jesus. First of all, he's clothed with a cloud. The description of him. In Daniel 7:13, he said, I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and he came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. In Matthew 24:30, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all of the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. In Revelation 1:7, behold, he cometh with clouds. Every eye shall see him, and they also which pierced him, and all of the kindreds of the earth shall wail because of him. We read in Acts 1:9 that Jesus was with his disciples on the Mount of Olives, and he began to ascend into heaven as the disciples were watching him, and a cloud received him out of their sight. There stood by them two men in white apparel, and they said, Ye men of Galilee, why do you stand here gazing into heaven? This same Jesus shall come again in like manner as you have seen him go into heaven. Now we know that when he returns, he's going to return and set his foot on the Mount of Olives. It will split in the middle. But coming with the clouds as he ascended